At 1447, over a vast stretch of the Atlantic Ocean, a U.S. Marine Corps helicopter was engaged in what seemed like a routine patrol until the radar lit up. A small, fast-moving object appeared on the scope at low altitude. Seconds later, the .50 caliber gun mounted on the helicopter's door suddenly roared to life. A drone, traveling at roughly 150 knots, bore down in an evasive zigzag as tracer fire tore through the sky. The helicopter lurched, the air vibrating from the shockwaves of each shot. It was an assault unfolding in real time, and those aboard could feel the stakes rising by the second. But this wasn't a battlefield overseas. This was over the Atlantic, a zone supposedly under controlled U.S. airspace. So what was this drone? Who sent it? And why did it dare to challenge a fully armed Marine helicopter? In the span of mere moments, what seemed like a straightforward sighting exploded into a pulse-pounding mystery. If you want to uncover every twist in this dramatic engagement, hit subscribe to Military Power now so you won't miss a single secret from behind the scope. At the heart of this unfolding drama is HMLA 269, the U.S. Marine Corps' storied Gunrunners squadron. Reactivated on July 1st, 2024 after an 18-month hiatus, HMLA 269 once again patrols the skies from Marine Corps Air Station New River in North Carolina, flying the agile AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters alongside UH-1Y Venom utility birds. Their mission is to support Marines ashore, perform aerial escort, and, crucially, counter emerging aerial threats. Why bring this squadron back online? Because the drone menace is no longer confined to war zones overseas. In the past few years, military analysts in the U.S. have sounded the alarm. Unmanned aerial vehicles are proliferating fast, attaining speeds of 150 to 200 knots, with operational ranges of tens of kilometers, and even the ability to carry explosive payloads. That's not science fiction. It's what the Pentagon and defense media now track as real danger. Compounding this is a string of drone incursions along U.S. coastal airspace. Late in 2023 and into 2024, mysterious drones were detected approaching the eastern seaboard, sometimes even in the skies above New Jersey. These sightings forced federal agencies to respond and raised urgent questions about how prepared America really is to defend its maritime borders. At a time when the Atlantic Ocean is no longer just a highway for ships and weather systems, but a proving ground for airborne threats, America needs to show it can respond. HMLA 269 is not just flying drills. They are demonstrating rapid reaction power in a high-stakes theater. Now, as we turn to what happened at 1447 over the Atlantic, you're about to see why this was never just an exercise, but a statement about U.S. readiness in the age of drones. The drone first appeared at about 800 meters out, glinting in the early afternoon sun as the ocean below shimmered. It moved almost too smoothly, weaving left and right, then ducking and climbing without hesitation, as if it already knew every evasive maneuver in its programming. From the cockpit of the AH-1Z Viper, the crew watched its silhouette dance against the waves. On the gunner's station, the .50 caliber machine gun loomed. The orders crackled over the headset. Engage target. In that moment, the hum of rotors and salt spray wind were swallowed by tension. A burst of tracers streaked forward, arcing toward the drone. The bullets carved arcs of light through the air. The target shuddered again, and began to spin irregularly. With one final shudder, it fragmented, an explosive discharge of shrapnel slicing the sky. To the crew's shock, that was not the end. At the same instant, the forward-looking infrared FLIR camera lit up with multiple heat signatures rising from the ocean's surface. 1 became 2, 3, before the system flagged 5 separate objects. This was no lone intruder. The sky ahead was suddenly alive with threats. The pilot banked the helicopter to maintain a safe angle, scanning for altitudes, angles, risk to civilians. Below, waves roared. The gunner reset his sights. The moment of calm was gone. In its place came the realization. They were facing a coordinated strike, or at minimum, a swarm tactic in motion. Every second now mattered. The crew had to decide, fire again and risk collateral damage, or wait and let the drones close distance. But closing meant danger. The margin for error was vanishing. Without warning, one of those thermal blips darted upward, nearly vertical, aimed to flank the helicopter's blind side. As alarms beeped and systems tracked velocity and bearing, the Viper repositioned. The gunner recalibrated, anticipating where the drone would intersect the path of fire. Then, in another burst, tracers raked into the second target. The same dance repeated: shake, tremble, fracturing pieces. Yet even as debris rained from the sky, more heat marks appeared past the horizon, others beyond reach, ready to enter. The ocean surface betrayed nothing, yet obscured everything. From below the waves, more drones might emerge. In those tense heartbeats, the helicopter's crew realized they were no longer playing out a predictable script. They were improvising in real time against adversaries with near-perfect timing. What had begun as a single drone intercept had mutated into an aerial chess match, where every shot, every angle, every split-second decision could decide survival. With ammunition running low and the swarm pressing harder, one last contact broke free, skimming across the waves at 45 knots. Was this the moment that would tip the fight beyond the Marines' control? Or could a single decisive strike end the storm? As the shattered remains of the first drone drifted downward, the crew barely had time to register relief before new threats appeared. The FLIR display flickered, revealing 4 to 5 additional heat signatures converging from the horizon, rising above the ocean's surface in precise formation. Simultaneously, the radar issued warning tones, a cluster of fast movers closing in at speed. It was not random. The drones flew in a coordinated wave, spreading outward as they approached. These were no hobbyist quadcopters. Their movement was too disciplined, their formations too tight. The sensors flagged them as military-grade UAV simulations, not civilian drones. Their flight paths mimicked swarm tactics studied in modern warfare. The implication was chilling. This was a rehearsal for real attack scenarios, or worse, a probing probe to test U.S. reactions. Inside the cockpit, tension ratcheted up. The pilot barked orders: Viper, take altitude; Venom, stay low. The plan was simple. One bird pursues from above, the other holds the lower envelope, minimizing risk of friendly fire and setting a lethal pincer. The two helicopters separated, climbing and weaving, shifting into positions that would maximize firing angles and minimize overlap. Through the haze of radar returns and infrared dots, the crew fought for time. Each drone that entered firing range became a potential target, but the constraints were real. Only limited weapons load remained. The pilots knew that squandered shots might mean helplessness when it mattered most. Under that pressure, the gunners cued shots in careful sequence, targeting those whose flight trajectories threatened intersecting paths. The formation tightened. A drone slipped toward the flank, attempting to ambush from below. Another arced in with high speed, drawing lateral motion to evade. The Viper pilot banked sharply while the Venom held steady, scanning for crossfire danger. They communicated in clipped brevity, adjusting angles, distance, and timing. Suddenly, one drone burst upward, zipping toward the Viper's side. The gunner on that bird pivoted the sight, anticipating its path. A flurry of tracers leapt forth, slashing through the air. The target trembled, broke formation, and disintegrated. As it fell, the others diverged, some pressing forward, some peeling away. At that moment, every second stretched. The pilots and gunners alternated between firing, repositioning, and scanning for hidden targets. The waves of threat funneled inward, the helicopter pair dancing between bursts, evasive maneuvers, and calculated revenge. The urgency mounted. The sky was becoming crowded. Debris floated down, glinting in the sun, but the enemy still outnumbered the defenders. The finite number of rounds, rockets, and targeting capacity constrained their options. Could they control the swarm before being overwhelmed? By now, the swarm was closing fast. In the cockpit, silence reigned for a heartbeat. Then the pilot's voice cut through: choose weapon. The crew understood immediately. Every rocket, every Hellfire missile counted. There was no room for waste. With only limited munitions on board, they could not afford to fire at shadows or false contacts. It was the moment to balance aggression against restraint. On the targeting screens, some drones hovered in steady flight, others twisted, trying to slip between the helicopter's firing arcs. The gunners considered which targets presented the clearest trajectories, which ones might cross paths dangerously, and which were too risky to engage. Each Hellfire missile launched would be a gamble. Get it right, and a drone vanishes in a flash. Get it wrong, and precious firepower would be lost. Decisions had to be spot on. Complicating matters further was the drone's stealth technology. Reports from defense research show that certain coatings can reduce laser reflectivity, mitigating guidance systems that rely on laser targeting. For our scene, that meant the gunners couldn't always rely on perfect laser lock. The drone surfaces absorbed or diffused some signals. Laser pulses bounced weakly, causing guidance uncertainty. The crew thus leaned heavily on the helmet-mounted sight system, which allowed the gunner to point where his head aimed, correlating where the missile should go. But that system required split-second predictive calculation. They had to guess where the drone would be, not where it was. One drone, faster and more erratic than the rest, slipped ahead of the formation. The gunner locked in, led the shot, and fired a Hellfire. The missile arced over the waves. It struck after a tense few seconds. The drone wobbled, exploded, then fell as debris into the ocean. The crew exhaled, but knew they were far from safe. Time seemed elastic now. Every second felt like minutes. The remaining drones maneuvered more aggressively, darting at odd angles, weaving between the helicopters. The gunners had to shift targets quickly, re-aim, relock, sometimes aborting one shot to take another higher priority. As if to punish hesitation, a drone veered dangerously close to a shipping lane used by civilian vessels. The pressure spiked. The pilot cautioned, "Fire only when confirmed. Avoid overshoot." The crew hesitated, bracing against the wind and rotor wash, adjusting their shot window. They took a breath. They squeezed the trigger. Tracer lines raked outward. A second drone burst against the sky, fragments scattering, but the team could see it. One more UAV was slipping toward the civilian route, its approach angle masked by waves and radar clutter. Engaging it would risk collateral damage, but letting it through was unthinkable. The moment was fraught with consequence. The crew intensified focus, lining up the trajectory with precision, accounting for wind, drift, and evasive motion. They risked firing the last Hellfire they had. It launched. There was a silent hang in the air, the missile chasing the target. Then impact. The drone disintegrated in a flash. It was destroyed. The air seemed to hold still for a heartbeat. The remaining drones still posed threat. They had pushed performance to the limit, but if more appeared, the crew might be stranded defenseless. The sky held danger beyond what could be answered with pulses and burst alone. Could the pilots maintain control in the final act? By this stage, the atmosphere inside the cockpit was stretched to its breaking point. The pilots had already burned through precious ammunition and seen enough close calls to know one mistake could be catastrophic. Suddenly, another contact emerged, different from the rest. On the radar, it showed a shift, dropping from low-altitude flight to skimming just above the surface of the sea. It accelerated to nearly 45 knots, carving a line through the wave troughs as if using the ocean itself as camouflage. Reflections from the late sun and the churning spray turned the object into a phantom, flickering in and out of sight. To the crew's eyes, it seemed almost spectral, darting between light and water, exploiting every trick to avoid being caught. The pilot of the UH-1Y Venom took responsibility for the intercept. His challenge was brutal. Maintain a laser lock on a target barely visible, bouncing against the backdrop of shifting waves, while the helicopter itself shook in strong crosswinds. Every gust pushed the bird sideways. Every vibration rattled the sensors. The lock wavered, flickered, and threatened to collapse altogether, but the crew clung to discipline. They steadied the laser, adjusted constantly, and held on through turbulence that would have broken lesser operators. For long seconds, it was an uneven duel. Technology and determination against stealth and speed. Then came the decisive move. From the pylon beneath the Venom's wing, a Hellfire missile snapped loose and surged forward. Its exhaust flame seared a path across the ocean's mirrored surface, leaving behind a streak of fire against the haze. The missile skimmed low, slicing through spray as it chased its target. The chase seemed endless, the air frozen in suspense. And then, at the precise intersection, came the detonation. A blast lit the horizon, erupting in shards of flame and twisted metal. The UAV disintegrated on impact, fragments scattering across the sea until the waves swallowed them whole. In that single dramatic moment, the battle was decided. All 6 hostile contacts, each one maneuvering, evading, and probing, were destroyed. From the instant the first drone appeared at 800 meters to the final strike, just 12 minutes had elapsed. A dozen minutes that felt like hours to those inside the helicopters. Each second weighted with decisions about life, death, and the safety of civilian shipping routes. When the last echoes of the blast faded, the ocean grew quiet again. The radar screens went dark. The FLIR registered nothing. For the first time since the fight began, silence returned to the skies. For anyone watching from afar, the conclusion might have seemed obvious. This was an attack. A brazen attempt to challenge American airspace. But the truth, once later disclosed, told another story. The entire encounter had been part of a live-fire certification exercise for Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron HMLA 269, the Gunrunners. The drones had been purpose-built to replicate the kind of military-grade unmanned systems the Marines expect to face in future conflicts. Their programming was designed to mimic swarms, evasive patterns, and stealth tactics seen on real battlefields. The location, over the Atlantic, was chosen precisely because it resembled the environments where genuine incursions might occur. It was, in short, a test, but a test conducted under real conditions, with real weapons and real consequences if anything went wrong. The Marines flew as though defending the homeland itself. They applied rules of engagement as if protecting populated coasts. The drones behaved exactly as a hostile adversary might. To the crews, there was no exercise mode. It was a fight. That is why the meaning of this 12-minute clash extends beyond training. It was a declaration. The United States is no longer content to simply react to drone threats. It is preparing to outpace them, preempt them, and crush them before they can reach American shores. What looked like the brink of conflict turned out to be a carefully staged demonstration of readiness. But the lesson remains. The line between simulated threats and real ones is vanishing fast, and when the moment comes, there will be no hesitation. When the last drone splintered across the waves, silence fell over the Atlantic. Viewers might have expected news of an attack, but the reality was more calculated. What unfolded at 14:47 that afternoon was not an act of foreign aggression, but a live-fire certification exercise for the Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron HMLA 269. The Gunrunners had been tested under the most realistic conditions the Corps could simulate: autonomous drones, unpredictable maneuvers, blinding sun, and limited ammunition. The challenge was to mirror the scenarios America fears most: unmanned incursions near the nation's coast. This wasn't fantasy. In late 2023, mysterious drones were indeed spotted along the New Jersey shoreline, baffling both local authorities and federal agencies. Such events made it clear that U.S. defenses must be prepared not only for distant wars, but also for unexpected threats at home. That is why the Marines trained with such intensity, because the line between exercise and reality is narrowing. The message is unmistakable. America's coastal skies are being watched, and squadrons like HMLA 269 are ready to launch armed patrols stretching from Virginia to Georgia. Exercises like this prove that when the unknown arrives, hesitation will not be an option. And so the question lingers: if one day these drones are no longer decoys, but genuine hostile machines, how will the crews respond? Leave your thoughts below And don't forget to subscribe to Military Power for more hidden stories of strategy, technology, and the secrets of modern warfare.